Welcome everyone to the September 14th, 2023 Helm Developer Call. I see the link has already been shared for the meeting minutes and agenda. And we've got no announcements this week. So we'll jump into the first discussion topic that I've added, and that is the release of 3.13. 3.13 was actually supposed to go out yesterday, and we have normally have a release candidate the week before, which didn't go out. I've been traveling the last couple of weeks and entirely forgot about it, and the ball seems to have gotten dropped by the other maintainers. So we need to work on getting that out. There is one blocking issue to getting it out, which is updating the Kubernetes libraries to the latest. I think that's the one major blocking issue right now. Find that. There's a pull request for it. I'll drop it in here. We'd originally created that with the bot. Here's a pull request for this one. We'd originally created this with the bot using grouping, and it didn't work. And then tried to reshuffle some of the grouping work Joe had done, and it didn't recreate and didn't work. So for this time, I did it manually. And Kubernetes 128.2 came out yesterday or the day before, so I upgraded to that. It's a fairly, it's an XL change, which is surprising to me, but that's just so many sub dependencies that are updated in the go-sum file. It's basically how it updated across the tree. So,
so one question is this going to there's just people asking about 3.13. I think people want to use the dry run flag, and I'm not sure what exactly why they want Helm 3.13, but there's been a bunch of people asking when it will be released.
Yeah, and that's because it's behind schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking forward. Is it expected to happen shortly, or is there going to be work needed to upgrade the libraries? As this
the pull request is there, and it looks like all tests are passing. So what I was planning on doing, and what I'd like to do, if I can get another maintainer to review it, either Joe or somebody else, then I'm going to see about getting the release candidate cut Monday, is my hope. I spent some time merging a bunch of pull requests, including some features today. I'll probably do the same tomorrow. Try to get the release candidate tomorrow, and then the following Wednesday, give it a week of soaking and stuff like that, and then we can cut the release. And so it'll end up coming out 2 weeks late for this release. We should probably announce the plan for this somewhere. Suggestions: should we write a blog post? Should we just post it on social media? Suggestions on how we let folks know when the release is going to come?
There's a GitHub issue already. If there was just a Twitter,
okay,
then I can link to that on the GitHub issue, and hopefully other people will see the GitHub issue, or if someone really wants it and they ask.
Can you drop the GitHub issue in here?
Yes.
And then I'll go follow up with that GitHub issue in one of my meetings later today. In the background, I'll comment and let people know the plan, because normally we have a very strict date. It's the second Wednesday of the month it goes out on, and this is not following that due to some delays.
Sorry, I just joined the call. Can someone message me like the context, and I'd be happy to get this out on Twitter. Also, we haven't done anything on the blog in a while, so if you're feeling inclined to blog, that's an option.
That's true. I might write a blog and then run it over to you, Karen.
Okay.
Just so needs an approval, and we might get something out here in the next day or so, just to inform people on what's going on, because we have the policy, and this time we fell behind. Accidents happen. So that was the thing that I wanted to talk about today, was just how do we correct from this. There are a lot of changes going into this upcoming release, and probably more if I can get through some of the other reviews where some of the stuff's already approved and whatnot.
I feel like there's a lot of changes in this release because Joe's approved a lot of PRs that actually got accounting. So I wouldn't feel like
Joe,
there needs to be a lot of other PRs reviewed to make a solid release. But
I want to give a shout out here, and I'll add it to the shout out section to Joe, because he has done a wonderful job of getting the first approval out there and marking some of these things, which has made it easy for me to come through and just do that second review. And know, because you need 2 reviewers for stuff from the community. He's done an excellent job in picking some really good ones that have been sitting around for a while and would be useful, and kind of highlighting those and propping them up. Big props to Joe for that. He's not here today to hear it. He's actually sick. So big props to him. So that was all I had. We'll try to get things back on track. I've got a bunch of other things I'm going to try and talk about each week that I'm here. So look for more non-routine topics coming from me in the near future. Is there anything else on this? No? All right. In that case, Ian, you've got something about the Get Helm script.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of chatter and issues and PRs on this Get Helm script. And I think a lot of it boils down to the GitHub rate limits that are getting applied. People hit them, they don't expect it. Various parts of their CD, CI processes are using, rate limits, and they don't really understand. And the way the script works, it doesn't really give you the best possible output. It's kind of it ends up being more complicated than you'd think to provide the body, because you're like, oh, I'm just going to provide the body. But then you're like, oh, if I do that, then curl doesn't give me the other really friendly error message. And obviously, you could work around all this stuff, but my inclination is to just get rid of it entirely, stop talking to the GitHub API, and it may be in our CI process, write the release out to the whatever the latest thing is into a file in the Azure bucket.
Yeah, the fact that the GitHub API, it returns the latest created release, not the latest Semver release.
Yes.
So it's actually semantically wrong. For what
that was the next point I was going to make, is I also think that the GitHub API isn't returning what we want, and that is if we released in a patch release of an old version, all of a sudden people would start downloading the older version instead of the newer version.
Yeah, and we haven't done that. We don't do that, which is why we end up being safe with latest, because latest is always that. We haven't had an issue of that since we discontinued Helm version 2. And that was one of those things we were aware of, right? And we said, okay, it's safe because we're not doing anything now. But if we have a better way of doing this to grab the latest, that would be great. We probably could do something as part of the CI process. I wonder what people are doing that they're running into this, because normally you run, the get sh script, and even if you're not logged in, you're not hitting GitHub for a whole lot of other things. We haven't encountered this too much before. So I'm curious what kind of environments are even causing something like this to happen now. Did GitHub get more aggressive, or?
I think GitHub might have got more aggressive, but also like corporate networks, there'll be a whole bunch of consumers behind a couple of egress IPs.
That's true.
And then GitHub just rate limits on the IP addresses.
Yeah, and it's not just Helm things. So I think a lot of people get confused because they're like, I'm not making that many requests to get Helm. I don't know why I'm getting this. But somebody else on some other team has something that's getting something else, and now they've run out of rate limit and they're surprised.
Anybody interested in rewriting this?
Well, I was going to put my hand up to do something first to write out the latest version to the Azure bucket, and then once we have that in place, rewrite the script to then utilize that. That was going to be my proposal. And my proposal is also going to be use real Semver, don't use GitHub
latest
Semver logic.
Okay. Yeah.
That
see what you got.
you will probably have still have the same problem again. Like, what is going to determine the latest release in the CI process? Because when we do make a patch release, that process is going to have to decide if it's the latest Semver.
Yeah, I
But
think there's some actions out there I can utilize to ask, is this
Okay.
the latest Semver release that's going out? And then I can, if that is
I also have
true,
one.
write it.
Perfect. Yeah, as long as I guess we won't be in a worse position if it is the latest release, because it would be the same as today. But yeah, ideally we'd make it follow Semver. The only other thought I had on this subject was we are kind of offloading these rate limits to the Get Helm, which I think you said is CD in front of an Azure bucket. Do we care about how much data people are pulling from this thing? Like, do we want to rate limit, or we just not so worried?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think you can't rate limit with the CDN. I wonder how much more it will be, because it's already a ridiculous amount of bandwidth going through there. It's a ridiculous. We need a better way to run things, but we don't.
It's interesting because I was kind of going down, the path of, do we care? And I don't know how much the Microsoft one costs, but like if we put this in like a Cloudflare R2 bucket that has no egress cost, it would, be dollars per month total cost. I don't know what, I don't know. I don't know what Microsoft cares or doesn't care
Well,
on
no,
this kind
that
of
I
stuff.
would. So I would put it into the bucket, and we probably want to look at, is there a way to change things up when we go to Helm 4, which is a conversation that has just started to kick around in the background. Because that's a time when we could change our release strategy on people and where they get it from and how they do it. So let's go. I would say it's okay to put it into the bucket for now, and then we will talk about this when we move forward on Helm 4. I wouldn't be too worried, because it's probably not going to be a whole lot of bandwidth, and you'd be amazed at what the bandwidth is through there now. I'm always amazed when I see the numbers. This will be a drop in the bucket alongside it.
You can also
I think the point George is making, though, if people are using the Git Helm script right now, GitHub is acting as our rate limiter, and and we're going to fix that by moving it over. Right now,
but if they're rate limited because they're doing other things on GitHub, it's not like it's they're typically hitting Helm constantly for that rate limit. And so it's their other GitHub stuff is the problem. So I'm not worried about the Helm part here, I don't think.
You can also wire up Cloudflare to the Azure bucket directly, because they have an agreement between the two, and so you'll get kind of like a reduced cost on the egress there as well.
Well, we have the Azure CDN already there. So our bucket is fronted by the Azure CDN rather than Cloudflare CDN. All right. No, sounds good. Ian, I look forward to what you come up with.
Yep.
And you actually have the next one too. The approach
do.
for CD on hook output.
Yeah, so this is actually feedback from you, Matt, on that hook output hip. And I think it was great feedback, because I hadn't really considered that very closely. For some reason, I just thought, I hadn't thought about it very carefully, really. I just thought, oh, it'll be kind of like notes, and it'll show up like notes. But I'm like, actually, when people receive notes, it's very different when they're calling it from CD. So I did a little bit of research here, and I tried running something through Argo to see what it would do. And it's like, oh, Argo actually just uses Helm templates. So
yeah,
it would be up to them to go look at the annotation. Like, we'd say, hey, here's an annotation, and if you want to go look for output or do whatever you want to do, that's kind of up to you, Argo, because you're not using Helm for the actual install. Flux actually does do use Helm like how we'd expect. So potentially they could actually make use out of it. I obviously, I'm sure that there's other folks out there using these things as well. But in any case, I kind of wanted to do a survey of how people were, how it might look. Flux doesn't really present any UI to the user where I could see like, oh yeah, this is how they'd want to see it. Whereas Argo, it actually would make more sense that they could have a tab on the Helm chart and it would have the items on it. But Flux doesn't really have that kind of GUI on it. I don't even know where Flux would put the output necessarily. Because it's
I wonder
mostly
where they
just
put the output. Yeah.
I from what I can tell, it doesn't really put it anywhere today. It just
They have Slack channels. Did you ask over there? Their maintainers might be able to point you to something. I don't actually know the answer with Flux.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I could kind of ask around and say, hey, if we had this feature Flux, how would you want to use it?
Yeah.
My initial thought from like an API perspective is I went down the thought of, hey, maybe it should kind of look like notes, and there's another object on the release that's like hook output. But then I started thinking about that and I'm like, that's not very desirable because now all of a sudden all that hook output's going to get shoved into the secret alongside all the other stuff. So that's not too great. So my idea there was maybe there's another install method that lets you pass a IO writer that the output could get written to. But in some ways, I'm kind of like, maybe before writing it, I'd want to know somebody would actually want to use it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that. And
I,
like maybe we
I
should just move forward without a plan on it and just say, CLI users or
yeah, I would ask the Flux folks first. Like some of them poke around the Helm community. I would go over to their Slack channel and poke them and see if there's a place they would be interested in doing this. Because if we had some kind of output there, you're going to want to grab that and display it somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how that will work because you don't just, and they have already integrated with the Helm SDK to do a whole bunch of neat stuff. So they would have ideas on here's how we could use it, here's what would make sense, that kind of thing.
Yep. Okay. I'll run it by them. But my initial thought for how I'd want to implement it would probably be like another install method that has an IO writer that would get that output that the CLI would present.
There's already the structured output, right? Shouldn't it be part of this?
It's somewhat structured, so it gives you the name of the container that's running it. I mean, we could potentially create a fancier one, but my thought is that attempting to provide like an object back is probably not going to be feasible for this kind of output.
No.
It would, they could be potentially large, that you'd really want a writer type interface to this to say, hey, this is output that Helm thinks your user should see, and I'm going to write that stream of output to something that a caller has given, and they can choose to store it or stream it or do whatever it is they want to do with it. But I'm just going to write to that IO writer.
Yeah, and it could be one of those things of when you create the action, right, for something like install or upgrade, you can attach the IO writer to one of the properties and that's used. And if that is empty, then we use, a no-op operator. And then the Helm CLI can attach a writer to that as an example. And then if you're not going to do it, you don't get the output. But that's one of those things we could do. And then that would be worth, talking about, blogging about, writing about as well for that kind of change. But that's a way to do it. But yeah, no, I see where you're going. And I just think of Flux because they might have some useful feedback on this for things we hadn't considered.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'll ask them. I'm kind of thinking they don't do anything with output today, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but it's worth asking.
Well,
they might have some thoughts on it.
Weaveworks, who's the biggest contributor to it, does have GUIs for Flux. And so the Weaveworks side of it might be interested in it, and the Flux community may know about them and what others are doing because there are GUIs out there, even if they're not in the open source project. And so being plugged into what they can do with that may be useful.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily is a purely GUI idea either. Like you could potentially want this output to be part of a notification somehow, right? Like, hey, the install failed. Here's a Slack message with the output of, the pre-flight check, or the validation that ran or whatever it is that, someone's tagged. So, but yeah, I hate to add this feature in and then see nobody use it too, right? Like, oh, I'm going to wire up all this, IO riders and all this stuff, and then nobody uses it.
And that's why I say go ask. They're probably our most well-known user.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's worth talking to them first to see if they'd even use it, because as far as an SDK goes, and especially within the CNCF, they're one of the more vocal users of using this full capability of things in Helm. And so this kind of thing would just be useful to run past them and see if there is a way, because that's an integration thing.
Cool.
But yeah, sounds good to poke there. All right. Do we have anything else? In the interest of time, assignments for the next call. I plan on being here. And does anybody want to moderate the next call? Not, I'll do it. All right, I'll moderate.
Just looking at calendar. I can do either. I should be here next week.
All right.
I was gonna.
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, never mind. Thanks, Ben. I didn't see your comment. That's all. Just, seeing how many more Helm people we can lure into Chicago.
Yeah, I was in Chicago 2 weeks ago. I wish it would have happened then, but yeah, next time. Thank you.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Anybody up for issue triage?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. And I'll be doing PR reviews. I was already doing that today. All right. We have 2 minutes left. Anything else?
I was going to ask quickly, Matt, on the subject of the KubeCon presentation, do you need me to chase the KubeCon folks? Because right now I think it's just listing you as the speaker.
I need to go back
I don't
and
know if
double
that's-
check. That should have been corrected. Let me go double check. That should have been corrected. I do have an email I need to forward on to all the speakers with the code and other details and things like that. I'll try to get onto that today.
Okay. Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, if it's been
Yeah.
fixed up, then awesome.
I haven't gotten any email yet from CNCF asking me to approve or disapprove or anything like that. So,
and at this point, they may have just put you on it instead of asking for that.
okay.
If there's something which is timely, would you be able to stick in the Slack group that we have on for KubeCon?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and put anything in there. So,
Okay, awesome. Otherwise,
All right.
will miss again. Great, thank you.
Of course. All right. Anything else?
Are you going to
All right.
KubeCon, Ian?
Am I going to KubeCon in Chicago?
No, Ian. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, Ian.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Awesome. I don't know if I added you originally because we started just a channel for KubeCon organization. So I'll add you if you're not.
Yep. Cool.
All right. Anything else? Everyone have a wonderful week. We'll see you online. Wonderful day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.